Since its first known documentation in December 2019 in Wuhan, China, this novel coronavirus has created a record-making pandemic. In the US, 25,018,420 cases have been documented, resulting in 417,936 deaths as of January 25, 2021. Nearly 1 year since the first documentation of COVID-19, 2 vaccines have been approved by the FDA. We ask ourselves today, are the COVID-19 vaccines currently offered in the US safe and should they be mandated? Has politics in the United States played a large role in the COVID-19 pandemic and thus affected attitudes towards the vaccine? And what are the socioeconomic benefits and problems caused by this vaccine? Moderna and Pfizer vaccines have had the fastest turnaround time in history and use a new technology for vaccines, mRNA. The US administration is now talking about mandating COVID-19 vaccines. So let's talk some facts. What are mRNA vaccines? How do they work? How do the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine work? How extensively were they tested, and how are they safe and effective? mRNA therapy application in vaccine is recent technology. mRNA is the genetic material in every cell that provides a translation of DNA to the transcription into RNA, which will later produce a functional protein. Since mRNA codes for proteins, scientists select a specific protein that they wish to create and use mRNA to encode it. A traditional vaccine requires a dead or practically dead virus to bolster an immune system response, but they can in some cases give people the virus. mRNA vaccines do not need to place a full viral genome inside the vaccine. Rather, they just place mRNA that codes for a small, carefully selected protein. With mRNA vaccinations, there is no viral introductions. Cells receive the codes necessary to build defensive antibodies to combat the virus. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are lipid nanoparticle encapsulated nucleoside modified mRNA vaccines. So let me break that down for you. Nucleoside modified RNA means that the modifications were made to the mRNA to cause it to synthesize a particular protein. The mRNA in both of these vaccines targets the S protein found on top of the virus cell. The S protein is a key protein in the functioning, invasion, and the integration of the virus into the human genome. Then, lipid nanoparticles are particularly beneficial for mRNA encapsulation. The ionized lipids facilitate transfer of mRNA from the vaccinated cell to human genome. This allows for an insertion of the mRNA into the human cell to occur more naturally, without raising the body's immune system. Once again, decreasing adverse reactions upon vaccination. mRNA vaccines are made to provide maximum protection with minimal adverse reactions. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccines have undergone similar testing, and they are still going through extensive testing, adding at-risk groups and other demographics. Before FDA approval, both conducted large, double-blind, placebo-controlled phase 3 clinical trials, noted by the CDC, with thousands of participants on a global scale. Pfizer studied 44,000 participants, half receiving placebo and half receiving the actual vaccine. The study found that after 12 days after the second dose of the vaccine was administered, there was 160 COVID cases in the placebo group and only 8 in the vaccine group. Prolonged studies are currently underway on the long-lasting benefits of these vaccines. So far, they've reduced the spread of COVID among those vaccinated with a vaccine efficacy of 95%. This result exceeded the FDA expectation of 30%. The Moderna vaccine produced similar results in a study of 30,000 participants. It prevented the development of the COVID-19 symptoms with a 94% vaccine efficacy after 2 months of being tested. Both vaccines demonstrate vaccine efficacy of above 85% across all ages, sexes, races, and ethnicities. Knowing the vaccines are safe and effective, the next stage in eradicating COVID-19 is developing herd immunity. Herd immunity is when a high enough percentage of the population has antibodies against a particular virus. When no one has immunity, contagion has many opportunities to spread quickly. The more immunity a community has, the less often contagion comes into contact with susceptible individuals, thus reducing the spread of the virus throughout the herd. Herd immunity requires between 50 and 90% of the population to have antibodies to protect even those without them. To protect everyone, the vaccine should be mandated to generate herd immunity and eradicate the virus.
Hi, my name is Lauren Sandoval, and I will be discussing Lens 2. Have politics in the United States played a large role in the COVID-19 pandemic and thus affecting attitudes towards the COVID-19 vaccine? The COVID-19 pandemic sent the majority of our country into various forms of lockdown in March of 2020, and as previously mentioned, the United States has reported over 400,000 deaths from COVID-19. In a USA Today article titled Map of COVID-19 Case Trends, Restrictions, and Mobility, it was revealed that at the height of restrictions in late March and early April, more than 310 million Americans were under directives ranging from shelter in place to stay at home. If the guidance from public health officials has remained relatively consistent since the strictest of COVID-19 lockdowns in March and April, what is causing these conflicting views on guidelines and regulations? In Worry, Avoidance, and Coping During the COVID-19 Pandemic, a comprehensive network analysis, Taylor and others includes that the belief that the COVID-19 threat has been exaggerated shows that this hub was associated with disregard for social distancing. This notion continues to make me question what promotes feelings of division in our country. President of the National Environmental Health Association, Sandra Long, sums up these variations to a few sentences. There has not been a one-size-fits-all solution because we are not a one-size-fits-all world. Resources and politics are different, as is the application of the science and recommendations. When did we first see a relationship between political occurrences and the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, regarding former President Trump's presidential approval during February, I learned that towards the end of the month it decreased to 20%, and by March 1st, after the first Americans died from COVID-19 and scores became infected, his net approval slumped to 12%. In the Kaiser Family Foundation COVID-19 Vaccine Monitor, December 2020, Hamel and others concluded that when political party was surveyed in relation to willingness to get the COVID-19 vaccine, 12% of Democrats as compared to 42% of Republicans stated that they would definitely or probably not get the COVID-19 vaccine. Finally, in the Yale News article titled Politics Affect Public Buy-in on the COVID-19 Vaccine, Mike Cummings published results from an October 2020 Yale University research study. The study determined that the reduction in willingness to get the COVID-19 vaccine based on proximity of vaccine approval to the presidential election. Based on these decreasing percentages, it can be inferred that people's worries regarding the role of politics subside as the distance between the election and the vaccine approval increase.
Since the COVID-19 vaccine has been introduced, many are quick to criticize it while others praise it. It is important to discuss not only the benefits of the vaccine, but also the problems that can be caused by it both directly and indirectly. A common question when discussing the vaccine is who gets it first. The main prioritized groups we see in this case of the COVID-19 vaccine are first, healthcare workers. By prioritizing healthcare workers, it not only protects their well-being, but also reduces the risk of further spread within healthcare facilities where the virus is most active. Next in line are other essential workers. These essential workers, because they work and interact with others in person, are more likely to contract and spread the virus. Adding on to their vulnerability working in person, they are more likely to be socioeconomically disadvantaged, as they do not have the luxury to work remotely or from home. Lastly, the third group are the medically vulnerable. These people include elderly who have underlying health conditions that can affect them drastically with the contraction of the virus. This too ties in with socioeconomic backgrounds and disadvantage, as those who struggle with underlying health conditions may have these medical issues due to not being able to afford certain healthcare benefits or treatment. This brings us to what consequences arise from certain groups or countries not having access to vaccines. This has a direct correlation to economic damages that are experienced by lower income countries that struggle to gain access for vaccines. According to a joint news released by the World Health Organization and the Eurasia Group, the consequence of leaving lower to middle income countries without access to the COVID-19 vaccine will cause drastic economic damage that sets back the country's economic progress by up to decades. The negative effect this has on these lower income countries in time will widely impact the global economy. This is merely the result of the pandemic's effects lasting longer in certain countries, preventing businesses from remaining open, citizens from going to work, and overall income coming in. Therefore, a globally equitable solution to the distribution of the vaccine is currently being commissioned. There are 10 countries currently contributing to the solution of global vaccine access. These countries are distributing their contributions towards ACT Accelerator, which is the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator, working to find and develop accessible treatments and vaccines while making them globally equitable. In this data visualization, we see the contributions of each country aiming to develop a solution to global equity for the distribution of the vaccine to prevent this unwanted yet extremely possible global economic downfall. According to the report for the ACT Accelerator commissioned by the Eurasia Group, we see that contributions allow for significant steps to be made. This is not just an economic issue being actively dealt with, but a social and political one as well. Aside from the worldly economic benefits the vaccine has, it's also important to consider the personal effects. Aside from the obvious benefits, there are also some that may be indirect. According to Dr. Govind Prasad, receiving the vaccine can indirectly alleviate socioeconomic harms, unemployment, poverty, and education deprivation. However, with the loaded benefits, we still see a large number of people who abstain from getting the vaccine, even if they can. Due to this uncertainty concern raised by many individuals, clinical trials were widely conducted to ensure the validity of the vaccine. In this specific trial done by Syneos Health, benefits of having the vaccine in the elderly were shown versus the absence of it. This trial was conducted over the span of 6 months. The results present the number of prevented cases of COVID-19, medical visits, ED visits, hospitalizations, ICU admissions, and lastly, deaths. Having these clinical trials validates or alleviates some concern over the legitimacy of this new solution to a pandemic to citizens who are not equipped to trust such a way around a life-changing pandemic. In the light of the current impending mandation of the COVID-19 vaccine, our goal is to try to bring you the facts in order to fully understand the implication of that mandation. In the scientific field, the vaccine has undergone extensive testing, meeting and exceeding FDA standards. In implementing this mediation, we would be going to achieve herd immunity for the American population, allowing us to eventually eradicate the virus in our nation. After reviewing surveys and analyzing attitudes across the U.S. as to how politics have played a role in the COVID-19 vaccine, we've come to the conclusion that U.S. politics have had a significant influence on viewpoints towards the vaccine. However accurate the facts presented through scientific evidence may be, in some cases, it seems that politics have had a greater impact on feelings regarding the vaccine. Keeping in mind the direct and indirect benefits and complications the vaccine may bring, the globally equitable distribution of vaccine can only boost not only the overall economies of countries, but the well-being of their citizens as well. The benefits outweigh the complications as derived from countless clinical trials and real-world applications for global economies.